Do you want to see the best Chaos Reach build in all of Destiny? Then you better stick around for this entire video, because the build that I'm about to show you lets you spam Chaos Reach like you're a literal Death Star, has some of the best ad clear in the entire game, and of course, a super stylish set of fashion coming along with it. It's basically the Warlock version of the insanely strong 5-second tether spam hunter build video that so many of you have been using so far. Hopefully BattleEye will go easy on you, because this build will genuinely make it feel like you're cheating. So please consider subscribing if you're a part of the 2/3 of Guardians not yet on board, and let's get into it. The main focus of this build is the Super Chaos Reach, a massive arc laser beam that deals insane DPS. Additionally, Chaos Reach creates arc explosions when dealing the final blow to enemies, allowing for some insane ad clear as well. It also allows you to cancel the beam by pressing your super button again to instantly restore up to 30% of your super energy, allowing for the possibility of a huge head start on your next Chaos Reach whenever needed. And while Chaos Reach is pretty powerful on its own, it becomes really strong when paired with the newly buffed Geomags stabilizers. This is because Geomags allow you to extend your Chaos Reach duration by an extra 10% for every single tick of Chaos Reach damage. As a result, you can effectively double the duration and damage of every single Chaos Reach super thanks to Geomag stabilizers alone. Additionally, thanks to the recent buffs, Geomag stabilizers also grant a sizable chunk of bonus super energy anytime you scavenge an Ionic Trace. Remember that Ionic Traces are the collectible object for Arc subclasses and give 12.5% grenade and melee energy, as well as 15% class ability energy every time you pick one up. And because Ionic Traces are so integral to both our ability regeneration and Chaos Reach super spam, we'll want to build into them, beginning with our first aspect, Electrostatic Mine, which not only generates Ionic Traces from all arc ability kills and any kill on blinded or jolted enemies, but also makes you amplified anytime you collect an Ionic Trace. And while being amplified isn't crucial for this build, it's still a pretty solid buff to have, giving a bonus 50 mobility, 40 handling, 33% increased slide distance, and with the speed booster effect acquired from sprinting while amplified, a bonus to sprint speed, jump height, and damage resistance. The other aspect we'll want is Arc Soul, which grants your Rift class ability the additional benefit of providing both you and your allies with an automated Arc Accomplice aiding in attacking ads, and gives you extra class ability regeneration when near allies, up to a bonus 120% regeneration when near 3. This bonus class ability regeneration becomes especially helpful as well when considering some of the mods that we will discuss later in the video. Getting back to Arc Souls though, inflicting final blows to enemies from the Arc Soul also counts as an ability kill as far as the Electrostatic Mind aspect is concerned, resulting in yet another way to generate those all-important Ionic Traces. And if that wasn't enough, while the wearer is amplified, Arc Souls shoot in bursts of 5 instead of 3, significantly increasing their damage and Ionic Trace generating capabilities. Now, with all of this emphasis on Ionic Trace generation, you might be thinking that a small bonus chunk of super energy on Ionic Trace pickup doesn't really seem like that much. I mean, how many Ionic Traces can you really make? Well, the answer is a lot when you begin to consider some of the fragments we are adding to the mix, beginning with the Spark of Discharge, which gives arc weapon final blows a chance to create Ionic Traces. However, it is important to acknowledge that the description of this fragment is actually a bit misleading, as the generation of Ionic Traces from arc weapon final blows is not actually based on chance at all, but instead based on a hidden meter behind the scenes, which, when filled, guarantees the creation of an Ionic Trace. Minor red bar enemies fill 1/3 of this bar, major orange bar enemies fill 2/3 of the bar, and champions, mini-bosses, and bosses fill 100% of the bar. The ionic trace generation from the spark of discharge also stacks with ionic trace generation from arc-affected enemy kills thanks to electrostatic mind, meaning that if you fill up that hidden background bar and defeat a blinded or jolted enemy at the same time, that single enemy will spawn 2 ionic traces. And what's more is that both of these ionic trace generation instances also stack with our second fragment, the Spark of Ions, which generates an ionic trace when killing a jolted combatant, meaning that in a perfect situation, thanks to the combination of electrostatic mind and the sparks of discharge and ions, one single enemy kill can generate up to 3 ionic traces. But in order to spread the jolt debuff to loads of enemies to proc ionic trace generation thanks to electrostatic mind and the spark of ions, we're going to need to enlist the help of our third fragment, the Spark of Shock, which allows our arc grenade to apply jolt to enemy targets. It's worth noting as well that when jolt is applied to an enemy, it is only when the enemy takes additional damage that the jolt debuff will actually activate to deal additional chain lightning damage. As a result, the best choice for our grenade slot is the Pulse Grenade, as it both applies and procs the jolt damage effect, all in the same ability usage instance. The final fragment for this build is going to be the Spark of Resistance, which simply grants an extra 25% damage resistance when near enemies, which is a must-have to ensure that you'll be as safe as possible in even the most dangerous of Destiny activities. In order to build even further into the ionic trace goal of this build, there are 2 optional exotic weapon choices that can make a lot of sense with this build. The first of which is a vanilla Destiny 2 classic in the Cold Heart exotic trace rifle. The neat thing about Cold Heart is that the damage from this weapon increases for each hit that you land on enemy targets, up to a maximum 80% damage increase after 41 hits. Furthermore, when it is in this fully charged maximum damage mode, it will also spawn an ionic trace from the enemy you are hitting every 2 seconds. And if that wasn't enough, picking up an ionic trace also decreases the amount of hits required to get to the fully charged maximum damage mode to just 33, down from 41, making it even easier to continue to spawn more traces. The second optional exotic weapon choice for this build is a newer entry to the Destiny sandbox in the Delicate Tomb Arc Fusion Rifle. Delicate Tomb works similarly to the Spark of Discharge fragment, where final blows with the weapon progress a hidden background meter to spawn an ionic trace. And while it's less beneficial when killing minor enemies, which only fill 16.7% of the bar, all other enemies, like majors, champions, and mini-bosses, fill 100% of the meter, instantly spawning an ionic trace. Additionally, picking up an ionic trace overcharges your next Delicate Tomb burst, increasing its damage by 30%, and applying Jolt, which helps spawn even more ionic traces thanks to the electrostatic mind aspect and the Spark of Ions fragment. As far as legendary weapon options go, any arc weapon sporting the Volt Shot perk is going to be prime for this build, as applying Jolt to a target will allow you to spawn multiple extra ionic traces throughout your killing sprees thanks to both the electrostatic mind aspect and Spark of Ions fragment. My 3 favorite choices here are the SMG for primary ammo, the Path of Least Resistance Trace Rifle for special ammo, and the Terminus Horizon Machine Gun for heavy ammo. But honestly, any Volt Shot legendary weapon will perform this function quite well, and even then, it's just a cherry on top of an already well-performing build, so don't feel out of luck if you're lacking these weapons. Now, in order to really round things out with this build, we're gonna need some mods, beginning with the helmet, which will sport 2 copies of Dynamo, which grants a chunk of super energy when casting your class ability near enemies, and with the extra perk from Arc Soul giving extra class ability regeneration while near allies, and Ionic Traces refunding 15% class ability energy, our Rift is going to be available quite often to proc these Dynamo super boosts and fuel our quick chaos reaches. For the final helmet slot, a Harmonic Siphon mod will do wonders to allow us to spawn Orbs of Power on Arc double kills, which is a no-brainer considering how much synergy Arc weapons already have with this build, thanks to things like the Volt Shot perk and the Spark of Discharge, enabling extra trace generation with arc weapons. Next on the gauntlets, building further into the class ability regeneration, we're going to want a copy of Bolstering Detonation and Focusing Strike, which both grant 20% class ability energy on grenade and melee hits respectively, allowing you to proc Dynamo through Rift Cast much more frequently. For the final gauntlet mod option, you'll want Impact Induction, which allows melee hits to give 20% grenade energy, providing more jolting grenades to generate more ionic traces and to proc Bolstering Detonation more often. For this reason, I like running the Ball Lightning melee ability over its Chain Lightning counterpart. As while Chain Lightning does jolt targets to generate an additional ionic trace, having a ranged melee option to more easily proc Impact Induction makes a night and day difference for having more grenades to safely use from a distance and to deal more overall damage. For the chest, you'll simply want to match some resist mods to whatever enemy damage types you're going to be facing, as more damage resistance is going to further enable you to remain active in firefights to spam your abilities and charge your super. For the boots, you're going to want 2 copies of Arc Weapon Surge to increase the damage of all of your arc weapons by 17% when armor charged, a stack of which you'll receive every time you scavenge an Orb of Power. These weapon damage buffs will make it much easier to mow down adds with your arc weapons to spawn ionic traces from the Spark of Discharge. For the final boot slot, we'll want to slot a copy of Recuperation, which grants a large chunk of health on Orb of Power pickup to supplement your constant gradual healing from your Healing Rift. And finally, for the class item, we'll begin with Powerful Attraction to automatically collect all nearby orbs on class ability activation, in essence also granting you bursts of healing, super energy, and stacks of armor charge on every Rift cast. And to further benefit ourselves through our gratuitous casting of our class ability, Reaper on the class item will allow us to generate even more orbs with orb creation from your first weapon final blow after every Rift cast. And since we'll be casting it so often, we'll want to be finishing up our class item mods with Bomber to refund a chunk of grenade energy on every Rift deployment as well. And before we get to stats, I want to mention that I've got Mobalytics written guide and Destiny Item Manager one-click loadout saving links down in the description below that you can use to easily reference or save this build at any time. Conveniently, those are both located in the description right next to the like and subscribe buttons as well, which I'd appreciate your consideration in clicking if you're enjoying the video so far. Looking at the best stats for this build, Resilience is still by far the highest prioritization thanks to its free 30% damage resistance. After that, since this build is all about super spam, Intellect is going to be the obvious choice. It is worth mentioning, however, that Intellect is a stat with very diminishing returns at higher tiers, with the difference between tier 8 and tier 10 being only a 2% faster super, so sacrificing a bit of intellect at the higher tiers to prioritize other stats is well worth it. As for the rest of our stat points, Discipline is key to spam those pulse grenades for their insane jolting ad clear and ionic trace spawning capabilities. And if you have anything left over at this point, you'll want to look towards Recovery, which on Warlock governs your class ability regen, which is crucial for extra class ability casts to grant us all of the benefits that we have discussed thus far. But knowing the build is only half the battle, while understanding how to use it is what will truly make you OP. In most situations, you'll want to begin by using your class ability when you first come into contact with a group of enemies, as this will give an instant boost to your super meter, begin overshield generation, grant an arc soul, activate Reaper to generate an orb on your next weapon kill, and scavenge any existing orbs with powerful attraction. Next, you'll want to defeat an enemy with a weapon final blow to generate an Orb of Power thanks to Reaper. From there, you'll then want to begin launching your arc abilities to generate loads of ionic traces thanks to Electrostatic Mind, and slay enemies with your arc weapon of choice while your abilities are on cooldown to spawn even more ionic traces thanks to the Spark of Discharge. Additionally, try to use your grenade before your melee and Rift to take full advantage of the procs of Impact Induction from melee damage and Bomber from class ability cast cast to quickly ready up your next grenade. Another useful tip is to keep an eye out for enemies on your radar, as it is a good way to gauge if they are close enough to proc Dynamo for extra super energy from class ability cast. With all of this applied, you'll have supers ready faster than you can use them. But before you go out there and start chaos reaching everything, please consider subscribing to see more builds if you enjoyed this one. I'll see you in the live stream. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, have a great day.